Hey everyone, this is Bill Kenny, CEO and co-founder of Focus Lab and Odie, two global B2B brand agencies. I'm back with another episode of the Debrief. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Marissa Homère. She's the VP of Marketing at Irwin. Marissa and I relive what that journey was like with her team and our team to go through what we would call more of a brand refresh, an evolution. Quite an evolution, I might add. So we talk about the challenges of that journey, right? Very specifically, we talk about what it's like to bring the entire company on that journey, to socialize that effort, how to socialize that effort in a way that allows everybody to understand why it is important and remind everybody why we're doing it. Hint, it's all rooted in strategy, and the strategy efforts become really helpful in that socializing. We go on to talk about what the most rewarding aspects of the project were for her. It was all around the brand archetype. And then we finish out with some highlights from the project. We touch on the fact that she also comes from an agency background, so you'll get to hear those highlights as well. Another valuable episode. Hope you enjoy. Okay, Marissa, we're finally meeting. We've actually not met, which happens now all the time in these interviews, which I was actually thinking about a minute ago. I think that's great and better because it kind of proves maybe how unbiased these conversations are.
Yeah.
And the first time you and I are literally talking about your project. But before we do all that, could you just take a minute, maybe introduce yourself and tell people what you're doing over at Irwin?
Yeah, sure. So I am the VP marketing at Irwin. I've been here for 3 years, almost to the day, funny enough. And I have kind of come in and built the marketing team here alongside Morgan, who is also part of this project with me. She's my senior director of brand marketing. So we've built the marketing program and sales enablement program at Irwin. And part of that, obviously, is the brand side of things. Prior to my role here, I worked at another software company. And prior to that, I was in agency for 7 years, which is probably something that is challenging for the agency on the other side of this project. It's been a crazy journey at Irwin. We essentially make software for investor relations and capital markets professionals. So it's usually like a very small part of very big companies. So it's a lot of pressure for the brand to also, stand out and be different in a way that works for that audience.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm glad you touched on the previous life in agency, because I think that will be a unique perspective in this conversation that doesn't always show up in these. So we'll see how that maybe organically comes out in the conversation. So my first question that I always lead out with is, how did you know that it was time to invest in brand?
So actually, we've always invested in brand from day one. When I joined, they had just gone through a bit of a brand redevelopment and refresh process. And, it was kind of like modern for our space, I would say, and good by most standards. And we've kind of built the brand beyond just the visual element. We've invested a ton of time, resources, energy into building a trusted thought leadership brand and community. We're big proponents of that here at Irwin, which is just, enabling space and content for our audience. No one gets a degree in investor relations. It doesn't exist. They often come from either finance or marketing and communications. And so it's kind of lonely, especially considering these are people within very large companies that, are a team of one, even at some of the largest companies, a team of 2 or 3. And so it becomes very isolating. And we've built our brand around supporting our audience and supporting what they do and uplifting their role in the community. And so we've always invested in brand. And it came time where the previous brand was just no longer serving us. And not even that it wasn't serving us, because actually, I think if you ask most people, they would say like it was fine, it was good.
Sure.
A lot of people loved it. But it wasn't what was going to take us through our next stage of growth, which I think was the catalyst. Morgan and I have been talking about this for over a year in terms of like, we've gotten to a certain point, but there was something that just felt startup-y and risky. And, we're working alongside some of the largest companies in the world. And it was kind of a bit of a mismatch. And our competitors are these like massive monolithic companies, and
Yeah.
they certainly convey a lot of professionalism. And not that we didn't, but it did come across as more risky to our audience. And so it was time to kind of tighten it up and take it through its next phase of growth.
Yeah. We hear that often. And actually, when I was looking back at the case study today, you're right. From a design perspective, right? It's like an image. So I only can go off of design. It feels startup-y, right? Through just color and execution. And most of the people that we work with, actually a large majority, are in that, okay, that was cool and it worked, but like we're trying to get here now. So what do we want to look like, speak like, execute on to fit that strategic direction? Yeah, great. So then you have the task of trying to find an agency, right? Which I'm on the other side of that. So I can't even imagine how challenging that is, right? There's just so many options, right? You could do freelancer, or more like, or you could do small company, big company. Prices are all over the damn place. What were you looking for in the right partner? Like, how'd you narrow that down?
So it's actually funny, having worked in an agency for a long time. At first, we did an exploration with kind of, I would say, design production agency, and like it just didn't feel right. We were looking for someone who would really take the reins on the strategy side, as opposed to just like give us something that is almost equivalent to what we have now, but maybe looks a little bit better. I feel like that wasn't the case. And in my previous life, working at what is now Craft and Crew, who I believe is a partner of yours, the team there always looked up to Focus Lab, and I feel like I had that in the back of my head, and I was like, but I feel like it's going to be kind of like out of our price range, or
Sure.
maybe even just too far in advance for us. And I suggested we at least explore it and see what the options were. And it ended up just being a good fit. We really liked the approach to the brand. We really liked also the flexibility and openness. We didn't necessarily need to rebrand Irwin. We just needed to bring it
Yeah.
to its current state. And I think the Focus Lab team was really flexible in, the direction that we were going to go on the project, and really started with strategy. So it would help us kind of determine what it was that we needed. And that was kind of one of the main reasons that we decided to go with you all.
Great. Shout out Crafting Crew. Yes. Great partner. And shout out strategy team, right? Design often gets a lot of love in these interviews. So any moment I can, shout out strategy for being an important, and not, let us not even maybe misspeak it, like a keystone element in all of these projects.
Yeah, I mean, without it, I don't think that the design matters, to be honest with you. I think like we had a fine, and at the time, like really good design for, our stage and our product, but there was no strategy. So it always kind of felt like it was missing the mark, and it wasn't like representative or cohesive in terms of showing who we were and telling our story and resonating with the end user. So I think that the strategy is arguably like, that's why we chose Focus Lab over the design capability for sure.
Yeah, great. Happy to hear it. And I'm glad you reached out. It's actually one of the things that keeps me up at night, is people thinking like they're out of our league, and whatever that word means to them, right? Like, oh, they've got big names on there and we're not a giant name, or their price points are probably too high. Like, those are the things that make me cringe, because I know I try to always say, like, just reach out to us and talk, like no strings attached. We're always happy to help. We're always happy to chat. And often we are looking for ways to make partnerships work, right? It doesn't always have to just be big dollar, big name. And you all are perfect examples of that, right? We just want to do good work with good people. All right. So you select us. Yay. And then we get into the project. So it's where the rubber hits the road. So I got a couple of questions here. The first one is, what was the most challenging aspect of the project from your perspective?
I think like there were a couple of challenges, and not in a bad way. I think these processes always kind of force you to think about business differently, to think about what you're doing differently, to get comfortable with, getting rid of something that you've built and something that you love and something that, you've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in, so to speak. I think like facing that reality was for not necessarily even my team, more for like the broader team, is like, okay, like we really need to share and socialize like the purpose and the reason of this and like what the end goal looks like. And it's not even an end goal, it's just like, what does this enable us to do?
Yeah.
So I think communicating and sharing that within our team was challenging for us, and like I said, in a good way. I think that friction always gives positive outcomes.
Yeah.
And then I think it was like distilling our brand visually into something that made sense. We went back and forth quite a bit on logo mark, no logo mark, which sounds like a really small thing. We had a logo mark previously, but through the process and through the back and forth with the team at Focus Lab, we were able to be like, actually, our name can kind of just like stand on its own, and like
Yes.
that's enough. We don't need to overcomplicate it. And so I think like that was a challenging thought process to go through. I think the outcome and the benefit of that is like our new brand is very simple.
Mhm.
And I think that that actually draws a lot of love from our community, from our team. Before we had what we called like a lot of decoration in our brand, and it kind of
Ah,
was busy and noisy and not necessarily meaningful or strategic. And I think the simplicity has made everything kind of feel elevated and next level while still being bold and human and fun in certain ways. So yeah, I
yeah.
think that was a really big challenge is simplifying. We also like work in a very complex space, like not only corporate finance, but IR is incredibly complex with the capital markets component and, all of the different tasks that our audience handles. And so it's easier to do more to speak to everything, but really distilling it down to something that's meaningful and strategic was challenging for sure.
Yeah. Fantastic. I want to maybe double click into a couple of those things. Is there any tips you would share with people that are going to run into, let's be real, they will also run into the challenge of socializing what we're doing, why we're doing it? Was there anything in there that really helped as a breakthrough in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to have a certain level of grit and, you're going to face questions, I think like mid project where somebody is like, why are we doing this? Like, what is even the point of this? And I think the Focus Lab team did a really, really good job of discovery. And that is something that I'm a very big proponent for because that context is so necessary for those conversations. And going through the process of actually even just like writing it down allows you to be like, this is why we're doing it. Remember, we all agreed on this. And it just kind of like drives the vision forward in a smoother way, referring back to the why and pushing forward on that and bringing your team along with you, having them co-create that, I think definitely limits the friction over the process, but it's just a lot of pushing through. And sometimes it can feel like, well, why are we doing this? Like, I don't even know. But when you come through it, and what's been really satisfying for us since we've launched the new brand is that everybody's like, yeah, it just makes so much sense.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. The grit and get through it for sure, right? In all aspects of what's challenging in the branding journey, but also leveraging the strategic discovery outputs as objective reasoning,
Mhm.
right? Not just subjective. Well, because we look startup-y and we want to look different. Okay, maybe some people can rationalize that, but that's still like not enough,
Yeah.
right? Because of this, because we talked about this. But yeah, I can see how that makes it a lot easier. And
Yep.
let me maybe just celebrate you, not even a question, celebrate you all for having the courage to actually go with just a logo type. So for the people that are unfamiliar, that means just the word as the logo, the name as the logo, and not an accompanying mark. That's usually a pretty tall task for people to mentally work their way through. And often they cannot get to the finish line on that. It's like, I hear you. I understand. We trust your judgment. I just can't resolve that. I still need the
Yeah.
thing, need to have the
Yeah.
thing. So the fact that you are able to actually get through that and understand that it's actually a great solution for you, given even the the structure of the letters in your name and the size of your name and all of that, it's perfect for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It's bold, it's strong, it stands on its own. We have a number of partnerships, one of them being with FactSet, which is, a very large, very respected, very well-known company. And now our name stands alongside their name with like equal power and weight.
Yeah.
Because like we found ourselves just trying to like find something that needed to be decoded. And then we're like, well, is anybody going to care about that?
Exactly.
And yeah, it turned out great, and I think represents us in a great way without being too corporate or stuffy. It still has like a very human feel to it, which is good, and we're all very happy with it.
Yeah, I love it, and again, just kudos to you all for being able to embrace that. Fantastic. Yeah. So on the flip side, you kind of noted on one of the aspects, but what was the most rewarding aspect of the project? Now let's still think in project, not outcomes, like in the moment, living and breathing the project. What was the most rewarding aspect?
There's a particular moment that I remember really well, which was the brand archetypes part. And that's very early in the process.
Yes.
But when the team showed us, our like leading archetype as the ruler and gave the description, seeing how that resonated with our founders and how they continued to use it, I think was really, really, really rewarding. Because it was it's kind of like a satisfying part of it, like seeing things come together and the outcomes is great and rewarding and satisfying. But I think seeing that level of clarity on who we are in a really like simple, distilled, relatable way was really, really rewarding to me anyway.
I love that. And I'm guessing that was especially rewarding and satisfying for you as well because of what you said, which is that you were able to see the founders instantly start to sink their teeth into and feel benefit and even joy, maybe, and excitement early in the project. That is also pivotal, right? When everyone's working on so many different things. And although I would love branding efforts to be the most important thing happening in any company, it's not always the case, right? So I love that you got that early win and the founders got that as well. That's great.
Yeah, it's good. To your point, I think like they have their hands in so many things, and they, as our entire leadership is kind of just stretched across the business, and shared priorities are always a challenge in big and small companies. And so seeing that sort of hit well and also help define who we are. Like we've known that for as long as the company's been around, but it has never been materialized into something simple and distillable that we could use and say and refer back to in terms of our, like who we are. So it was really, really satisfying for sure.
Love it. Another shout out to strategy. Let's go strategy. All right, let's, I guess, transition out of the project. So we go through picking colors and what's the right color and shade of this, and is there line work, is there not line work, and all these kind of nuances that are what I think are really fun aspects of the project. They are challenging, but enjoyable. And all these, finding the right words and messaging, strategy, visuals, words, the whole deal, all the way to the finish line. We get to the end. Y'all have been launched for how long now?
Since early June. So a couple months.
Not all that long. Yeah, a couple months. So still very early in that release. So this will be a very open, broad question. Feel free to attack it however you want. But we always want to address this ROI question, right? Like, what's the return on brand or an investment like this? And then the easy answers are like, what takes a long time to see that return? But there are certainly things it's helping you do now already. And I'd love to hear what some of those might be, just so people can understand the impact.
Yeah, I'm not a huge believer in that it's hard to quantify brand. We've, from the get-go, invested in things that aren't direct response or direct return in terms of our brand. We spend hundreds of hours every year on content production, including like a podcast that is hard to quantify in terms of like, we put this in, we get this out. But I think like we have tracked since the beginning of our department the lift and return that brand enables us to have, and it is like a hockey stick. Like you see how that enables our sales, how that enables our growth, how our customers feel about us. So I definitely think that we've already started to see returns on it that kind of compound against all of the work that we've put in over the last couple of years. But we use it for everything. When it's kind of leveled up everything, our sales team, as an example, something that you take for granted is like a sales deck, and being
Yes.
able to distill the messages and really showcase your value and your differentiators. And that definitely gets more use in this brand than it did in the old one, for sure. So that's
Yeah.
directly contributing to our growth. All of our content has been rebranded, our website as well. So part of the project we did with Book Club, we kind of like tacked it on, was kind of like a reskin of our existing website from a design perspective. The one part that is pretty hard to quantify is how different it feels. Like everything feels like it's a level up from what it was before. Everything now kind of matches who we are and the level of growth that we've kind of gotten to. It feels equal now. So,
Well,
whether it's our pricing or, any document or sales deck or podcast episode, there's just so much more cohesion. And I think that definitely has an impact on how risky we look to our prospects. I think the decrease in kind of like that transactional risk, when you even just at a glance looking at the website or piece of content or a proposal or something of that nature, I think has definitely made an impact, for sure.
yeah, great. You're only a couple months out too, right? It's very
Exactly.
fun to follow along for years and see how that brand, and you are a great company, right? You take brand serious, continue investing in it in a variety of ways, and continue to compound, to use your word, right? It's such a compounding effect.
I will also add that we launched the new brand against your team's advice. We participate in our biggest conference every year, which is essentially has the entire profession of IR at it, in San Francisco this year. And we did a co-branded booth with our partners at FactSet, a 20 by 20 island. The response from our partners as well was really positive on the new brand, which that's something that's kind of intangible, right? Like,
Sure.
and something that's hugely beneficial to us, because the more we look equal to both them and to prospects who are evaluating our integrated solution, it's great for the relationship. It's good for the community. It's good for everything. So
Yeah, great.
that's an add-on piece of put in there.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is where, I don't know, maybe this is where our reservation came in. Don't rush the work to get to the moment in time, which would be the conference. It's always a conference, seemingly, for us, right? We're always having that conference date coming. That's where the reservation comes. But if it times well, they do end up becoming really great moments in time, lightning strikes for the reveal of that brand. You have so many people there, like you even mentioned, right? Partners in the industry, competitors going like, oh shit, like they look way better than us now. And then obviously like customers walking around. That's great. Thanks for not listening to us.
Yeah. And sometimes you just gotta be like, well, we're gonna do what we're gonna do, and love it or hate it.
You're not the first person to actually say that in these types of interviews. Casey, another CMO over at Quantiv, talked about how we had also told him, like, oh, don't pin this whole thing to that event. Maybe we don't know what we're talking about. Hey, we try.
I get it was a lot of pressure. And I think in the moment leading up to the week leading up to it, I was like, why did we do this? We should have listened. But in retrospect, like I wouldn't change it. Like I feel like it was the right moment, and it was the right moment also in our story. Like a week later, we launched our partnership with the New York Stock Exchange. It was a lot of pressure and a lot of work leading up to that moment in a condensed time period, but I think it was still the right time. If I had started a year earlier, maybe that would have been better, but
Yeah.
we're here and we did what we could,
Great. Yeah, I was leading us out, but let's ask one more. Let's do one more thing. Let's Steve Jobs it. Was there anything that you found that was especially unique or like refreshing that was part of our agency model?
I think like the to the minute, like, nature of your process and how strong it is, it definitely takes a certain level of accountability from the client perspective to be able to agree and maintain those deadlines and dates. But the process was so strong. I just remember thinking like, man, like they have their shit together, because when I was an agency, it was always a little bit of like, oh, you're trying to figure it out as you go along, or, different people in different departments have different processes than others. But it was like a machine, almost to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, like, do we need to slow down? Because from our perspective, it was hard to keep up. But
Yeah.
I think it was really evident that you all have done this and have established these projects for other companies, and in our position, that the team asked a lot of questions. The discovery was super thorough, which I think helped the whole thing.
Mhm.
But I think it's just like seeing how locked in that process was, is I was blown away by that. Surprising and great in a good way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that. We run a tight ship. You're right.
It
We've been
is
doing it
tight,
for
yeah.
almost 15 years and we only do this thing, right? So it allows us to really zero in.
And
So
it keeps us focused on being accountable to those things, because it was like, oh, we need to do this. So every Monday or whatever it was, we would meet with both of our founders who are part of our like project team, go through what had been delivered, provide the feedback. At times it was like getting, everybody, especially since it was all senior folks on the project, getting everybody to commit the time was a
yes.
bit of a challenge, but it kept us on pace. It made sure that everyone knew what to expect, especially after the first couple of weeks. Like, this is, you have to give your time to it.
Yep.
And it definitely was a benefit. And, we were never following or chasing things from you all, which is a hard thing to accomplish as an agency who's handling multiple projects. But the team was on point and kept us on point, which I think made us better through the experience too, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the training partner that's like, it's time to get up and go to the gym. And you're like, I don't want to today. And it's like, it's time. We agreed. But
Time to
in the
go.
end, right, it is better. That type of
100%.
relationship is better. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, well done. Well done. We're happy to have partnered with you all. You're such fantastic partners. We couldn't be more excited to watch you continue to build new partnerships and watch your growth. And just you specifically, I would just pass along the team thoroughly enjoyed working with you and your team as the kind of direct relationship on this project. And yeah, thanks for trusting us. Thanks for reaching out and trying to at
Yep.
least see if we were the right fit. And hey, we were. It was a great match.
Yep, it worked out, and I'm glad I did too. And especially being an agency for so long, you kind of like have some pre-established, expectation of like, oh, they're gonna come back, and it's gonna be like we're not gonna be able to do it anyway. But it was worth the risk, I should say, and the whole team was very accommodating to us and super professional. And we don't work with basically any agencies, and haven't. I've had a really hard time as an ex-agency, especially in leadership, engaging in relationships with agencies. And I feel like this was really a frictionless experience for this project, and couldn't be happier.
Well, again,
Well,
thanks, Marissa. It was such a pleasure working with you all, and it was a pleasure meeting you here for the first time. Thanks for coming on, sharing your experience, and we'll be in the background just cheering you on, celebrating the wins.
awesome. Thanks so much.